Welcome to the Bladtcast 387, which sounds even crazier when you say it out loud. Christian Blatt here, as always. Happy to be joined by comedian Don Jamieson, who his latest album, Denim and Leather, and he's on Twitter at Real Don Jamieson, and of course the website donjamieson.com. Don, thank you so much for taking some time out of your morning/afternoon. You know, it all blends together at this point.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. Nothing better than getting a nice hot cup of Joe. And you notice I'm not doing the fake taping a tea bag to the outside while I'm really drinking, a rum punch or something. This is actually coffee, so.
Yeah, no, that's good. For those watching on YouTube, you can see the proof. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there's probably business to be made in sort of getting just the little fake tea bags that you can affix on there. You know, the way you put like a lemon on an iced tea. Here's my fake tea bag.
Yeah. It's like all the celebrities in Hollywood who walk around with their giant Starbucks cup the entire day. Yeah. Maybe in the morning it had coffee in it.
Yeah.
But by 4 o'clock,
yeah,
probably a lot of Starbucks vodka in there.
Yeah, and that's why you get the venti so that throughout the day you can kind of even it out. Oh, just got this. So obviously, a lot of people know you as a great stand-up comedian, but I would say it's probably safe to assume the majority of people who you run into know you from that metal show, the show you did with another great comedian, Jim Florentine, and Eddie Trunk, who is sort of this like guru of hard rock and heavy metal at this point. I listen to his Sirius show every day. I mean, it's like, I don't know him, but I feel like I've like called in a couple times. I never call into radio, but I'm like, him I can talk to, you know what I mean? So that show was so fun, that metal show, because it was like, oh yeah, it's like just a couple of guys hanging out, talking, the way that we would talk about music when cameras aren't rolling, and probably the way that you guys talked when cameras weren't rolling.
Exactly. And that was the one thing we said from day one, like no matter what the segments are, if we change them up, because we had our signature segments and stuff like that, but we said at the core of it has to be exactly how you described it, which is just us, we're just all passionate fans, and the best compliment I ever get from people, and still to this day, is that's you guys or me and my two friends in my basement, listening to music and having these debates that to most people don't have any right or wrong answer, but to us there is a right answer between which album's better, Ozzy, The Blizzard of Oz, or Diary of a Madman. There's a passion to it, and so God damn it, there is a right answer to it.
Right. It's like, look, I love both like Aerosmith Rocks and Toys in the Attic, but if I have to pick one, I'll be happy to defend either one of them, and that's why, yeah, that throwdown segment was always good. I like that you guys were hanging out at Eddie's house like about a week ago, his shore house, and then you did like a little Facebook version, and in it, Florentine mentioned the thing that I always notice, and Eddie is so tolerant of people who tweeted him about the show, and it's always the same thing. Well, why don't you call Netflix? And and Florentine seems to always wind him up of like, hey, Eddie, when's Netflix calling you back? Because obviously, it's like, we've thought of that, right? I mean, it's not, this isn't a new idea that we should try and get that show on Netflix,
Right. Well, it's like it was like especially the early years coming up doing stand up. People would, you'd be talking to somebody about it, and they'd be like, "Well, why don't you just get on SNL?"
Right.
Like, yeah. So I could just call them up and say, "Hey, listen, Lauren, I'll be in on Monday morning. See you then, pal."
Yeah. I'm working on some impressions for Monday. Yeah, the best one of those is my friend who wanted to get into radio. His mom called him and was like while we were at work, and is like, I figured out what you should do. You should be the DJ on Ellen's show. And he's like, yeah, I think somebody has that job, and why would you leave that job if you're the DJ on Ellen's show? You play like 4 minutes of music every week or whatever. So yeah, it's great. Everybody always feels like they have it figured out, so, and I guess sometimes, it's all about, managing the expectations and figuring out where you can end up. But the idea of doing that show was great. And I like the show you do now for Compound Media, which is Anthony Cumia's network.
Yeah.
That Jamieson show, it's just you, but it's predominantly a rock show. I know you have my boss Dennis Miller on it, but the majority of the people you have on are rock guests, and you talk a lot about music. So how did that come about? Did you pitch them, or did Anthony just think like, oh, we should have somebody talking rock? Don would be a great guy, or how does that show come about?
Yeah, so those guys wanted us to bring that metal show over to Compound Media, which we would have loved to do, but because they're still a young subscription-based service. I hate to say it's about the money, but to hire one host is one thing, but when you got to lock three of them in, yeah, it's kind of a different story. And then there's other elements involved, but.
No, and nobody could manage Florentine's writer, I'm sure. Like everything that he insisted for every show, they're just like, forget it. We'll just get Don. It's too much of a headache,
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's Florentine, always the difficult one, but yeah, we love, we all three love the network. We've all guested on there over the years, and then it just came to a point of where I actually got so much great feedback from their subscribers, like, come on, do even if it's just you, do something on the network. And I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, in this world of social media where, to me, it's just, especially Twitter is just basically a hate farm.
Oh yeah.
And I don't mind criticism, but, like 99% of it, you got to just let roll off your back. But if it's a subscriber, I take that a lot more seriously, because these are people who are literally paying my salary. They're it's a subscription service; they have to pay. So I take their compliments and their criticisms. I give it at least a little more weight, and I've only gotten such great positive feedback from that audience, and they're super loyal. So it's been a great fit, man.
Yeah, and I mean that's we've kind of cycled through a lot of the on-air talent from Compound Media on Dennis Miller's podcast. We've had Anthony on, Dave Landau, and Aaron Berg, and yourself, and there's so many great different voices where you don't feel like, oh, these comics are all the same, but they have the right sensibility where you're like, okay, they're going to say something that if they were on Ellen or Fallon, they wouldn't be making any of these jokes, but you feel like it's a safe place because Anthony's going to have a place where it's like, you're not going to get in trouble for what you say. So you don't have to worry about it. I mean, look, Dennis has a lot of freedom for what he can say for Westwood One, but at the end of the day, it's still, it's right out there for free. And when people are paying for it, it's like, I understand exactly what you're saying. It's like, they're your bosses. If they like it, they're going to stay subscribed. So then you don't have to worry, I think, as much, right?
Well, why can't I just call Ellen and go on?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Hey, I've got 5 clean minutes. Don't worry, Ellen. It's fine. I promise I won't bring my vodka Starbucks when I sit on the couch next time.
That'd be the only way for me to get through that one. But, the last live stand-up show that I did was Friday, March 13th in Philadelphia. It was the Comedians of the Compound. And yeah, man, while we all might have a similar sensibility, it was great, man, because every comic was totally different. And, to me, doesn't matter, if we're all from the same network or not, like that's always the best show for the audience to see. Is you don't want to see 5 of the same guys / girls go up with the same kind of thing. And man, that was such a great way to go out before this whole pandemic happened and the quarantine and all that. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I love the sensibility of the comics on the network, and yeah, again with my show, I do a lot of rock talk. But to have Dennis come on, I at least have that. I can do whatever I want with the show. If I change the show every week, Anthony will go, oh, that's cool. You do a completely different kind of show every week. Like there's no restrictions on it, so I can broaden it out to be whatever I want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the best thing, whether it be podcasting and, I mean, obviously those shows are all available as audio podcasts, but there's also the video. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to talk to somebody for an hour or maybe even an hour and 15 minutes, which, the worst was when I produced Dennis's radio show too. So you have a great guest and it's like, great, you can talk to them for 8 minutes. And then you take a break for 5, and then you talk to them for 6 minutes, and then you take a break for 4, and then maybe we get 3 more minutes with them. So somebody would be on the, like Tom Hanks would be on the phone with you for 35 minutes and he'd be on for maybe 15. And it's like, it's so infuriating. So to do it this way, I think it's great. And I love that, yeah, like your show, you get to have some long form conversations. I had emailed you this when I went to go listen and see when Dennis was on. I saw that the episode before you had literally my favorite musician, Alice Cooper, and Bruce Kulick. I grew up a huge Kiss fan. And so that was the moment where I'm like, oh, I'm definitely going to talk to Don because you held up the same album that is my favorite, Alice Cooper's From the Inside. And I don't even have a turntable, but I needed this on vinyl because for people watching on YouTube, you open the doors and everybody's in the mental hospital, and I guess this one's not open, so I feel like I shouldn't, but it's a cool, like, physical album, but I've always loved the songs from that. And that's such a departure from, especially what he did, like, with the Alice Cooper group at the beginning of the 70s. What is it? I mean, I love that there's just that sensibility of him in the, the guy goes to kick booze and he ends up in an insane asylum. What could be more Alice Cooper than that?
Yeah.
But I love the premise for it, but the songs are so good. Like, I always love that song, We're All Crazy, that's kind of at the end. But, and, when I saw somewhere in the last, like, 10, 12 years, he started doing Wish I Was Born in Beverly Hills live. And my wife goes with me. She likes Alice Cooper. She loves the show. She knows some of the songs. She had no idea why I was losing my shit because he was doing this song, and his wife,
Yeah.
his wife is in the stage show, but his daughter was dressed up like Britney Spears, and I was just like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And she's like, okay, I guess, but when are they going to cut his head off?
Right. No, I mean, God, man, there's a lot to discuss here because I'm like you, man. Like when I go to the concert and I hear one of those deep tracks, and he's done that his whole career. To his credit, man, he's never afraid to throw, I Wish I Was Born in Beverly Hills, or You Drive Me Nervous,
Yeah.
or Public Animal. I saw him do. He opened with Public Animal number 9,
right?
Probably about 5 years ago, and I'm standing. I went to the show alone, and I was just standing next to another dude, probably around my age, who was also by himself. And when they opened with that song, we both looked at each other like, oh my God, I can't believe he's opening with this. And everybody around us all turned and looked and went, what, is this new? What song was this? Like,
yeah.
we were losing it because we know this is from School's Out in '73. So
right, and of course it's like
this.
It's a deep track, but it's probably on an album that like at least half of the people there have because it's School's Out.
Right.
So it's like you just don't know that song though. Yeah, and he does a great job. That one that he did recently, it's I also just have the 45 because I thought it looked cool. Was Clones. And
yeah.
I just sort of love the greaser look. You can sort of see, I actually got him to sign it when he got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You can just go to those things. So I got there early and I like camped out and watched the whole thing, and I got him to sign it. But anyway, so just being a fan, but I always enjoy interviews with him. You had a great conversation with him. And, I had the chance to meet him once, and I mentioned that I work for Dennis. So of course we got to talk about what a bad golfer Dennis is. So that was funny, but I think it's got to be great though to, like you're saying, you have this show and it's like, you look down and you're like, great, I'm going to talk to Alice Cooper and Bruce Kulick today, and whoever, but
well, I've known Alice for years, and you're right, he's just such a great storyteller. And I even tried to bait him into telling a couple of stories that I know he always tells, but he told different stories. Like instead, that's the thing with him. Like even when I tried to steer him in a certain direction, knowing, okay, he's going to tell the Elvis Presley story here, he didn't. He told a completely different story. So he always keeps you guessing. That's why one of the reasons I love him as much as you do. Live, he always keeps you guessing. The song selection, and his whole career has been always changing. You know, he was industrial in the 90s. He was hair metal in the 80s. You know, he was heavy metal in the late 90s, early 2000s. Then he sort of went back to like that stripped down Detroit sound. So he's always evolved. And from the inside, the reason I love that album so much is just because of everything about it, starting with the story. It's 1979. There's no Betty Ford clinic. You're a hopeless alcoholic. What do? They throw you in a mental hospital with people who literally just chopped up their uncle in 50 pieces last week, and mailed it, you know, to all their friends. So, you know, that's who he was in there with. So every song is about one of those characters, and when you listen to the album, you feel yourself in the asylum with him. And, you know, it also documents all of his darkness, like in the quiet room where they put him in the padded room, you know, because they were afraid he was going to like hurt himself.
Yeah.
And then the ballad to his wife, How You Gonna See Me Now, where he's like, he's about to get out. He doesn't know, like, oh my God, is my wife still going to love me? Like, because he had never been sober to that point. So and then the last thing was like, we're all crazy now, you know, it's like, did he lose his mind?
Yeah, and that's sort of, you know, and I know he mentioned this when he talked to you, but, you know, co-writing that album with Bernie Taupin, that's how you end up with like, How You Gonna See Me Now. But obviously, you just see like how gifted a songwriter Bernie Taupin is. He does all those great songs with Elton John, but then he's right there with Alice Cooper with, you know, Millie and Billy and just all of these, you know, crazy songs in there. It's interesting because when I first really got into Alice Cooper, I'm 44. So the Trash album, that was when I'm like, oh my God, this guy's the greatest. So I go back and I'm trying to, you know, obviously for the kids out there wasn't an internet. I couldn't Google and figure out all this stuff about him. You know, I would try and, you know, I'd read old articles. There's like these, maybe I'll grab them in a minute. There's these like hard rock heavy metal comic books that would tell like somebody's backstory. And so I would go back and I would like get these old albums and I'm like, okay, so this is when he got clean. But then you start like listening to the albums after that, which he calls his blackout albums. You know, you have Flesh to Fashion, Special Forces, Zipper Catches Skin, and Data, which I as much as I love Alice Cooper, very rarely do I'm like, you know what, I'm going to listen to Data front to back. You know, maybe it might make me laugh to listen to that song, I Love America. But, you know, and he even says he doesn't remember doing those songs. And I'm like, yeah, I can't blame you. You know,
they're just be in a weird mood
to pull out
one of those albums.
Yeah. And, you know, it's just, it was so cool to see. But then, you know, that documentary that was that 5-6 years ago, that Super Duper Alice Cooper, I didn't even realize that like when he relapsed so hard that he like actually got into drugs, which, you know, I always thought he just drank a lot. So to see him really talk about it, it just helps you understand him better. And then of course he comes back with this sort of like the metal Alice Cooper, you know, with that guy, Kane Roberts on guitar and Kip Winger was his bassist, the Constrictor album. And I'm like, well, I love these albums, you know? So like Trash was definitely like my little gateway drug, the same way that really Aerosmith's Permanent Vacation and Pump were the first ones that I knew them for. And you just go back and like, oh, wait, all this stuff is it's so different, but it's all good. But like you're saying with Alice, it like, there's so many, not even ups and downs, just, you know, bobs and weaves. He turns so much that that's why it's always so interesting to see him. That was the first concert I ever went to on the Trash tour at the Ritz in New York, which I think is the Ritz that's now Studio 54, but it's the fake Studio 54 where they have like Broadway shows, not a, you know. And then speaking of Bruce Kulick, that summer I then went and saw Kiss, Aerosmith, and then the Whitesnake that had Steve Vai in it. So that was like my summer. And that's when I'm just like, great, I'm going to do this like all the time. You know, I love seeing all these bands. I was wondering what some of your earliest concerts were. I know you've talked about how Kiss was kind of your gateway drug. Was that one of your first concerts too?
No, I was, you know, it's funny, man. Like some of my favorite bands, I never even really got to see live because I was like a year and a half kind of too young. You know what I mean? So I never got to see the original Kiss in their makeup. I never got to see Thin Lizzy, who's, you know, arguably, you know, them and Motorhead are 1A, 1B for me. I've seen Motorhead a million times, but I never got to see Thin Lizzy. So that's the power of the music, man, that band could still be, that band's music still has such an effect on me, even though I never got to see him live. So, yeah, when I was a kid, Kiss. How could I have ever met them or gone to see them? I was a kid growing up in the suburbs in Jersey. Like, it's amazing that, like, now I could call Bruce Kulick and go, "Hey man, can you come on the show?"
Right.
Like back then I'd be like, I just show up at the arena and show my, give my ticket that I mowed lawns for all week, and can I go in and see the show? And now a lot of these guys are in my Rolodex, and a lot of them have become friends over the years. So it's crazy how time has kind of, changed things. But I never lose I never lose sight of the fact that I'm still a fan to this day of all these bands. And yeah, Kiss Destroyer was the gateway album. The gateway concert, which also ties into my life later on, is Asbury Park Convention Center, Judas Priest on the Point of Entry tour, Iron Maiden on the Killers tour with Paul Di'Anno singing, and also at that show
they toured together. That was Priest and Maiden the same show, right?
Yeah, Maiden opened for Priest, and the other two dudes at that show who I didn't know at the time, and none of us knew each other, was Eddie Trunk and Jim Florentine. So we were all at that show together. And
oh yeah, I've heard Eddie talk about how his dad like waited in the car, and he heard Priest coming out on the motorcycles, and he's like, "What the hell did I take you to?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
yeah. And then Jim came out all stoned from getting a contact high, and I couldn't hear for like 2 days. Yeah. My parents were like, why would you do that to yourself? And you can't explain it, but it's funny that we were all at that same show, and then years later, we end up doing this television program together dedicated to that exact type of music. So yeah, that was my first like big metal concert. Now I've seen Kiss over the years, but man, I would have loved to see them in their prime. Ace, Peter, Gene, and Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I saw them on I don't know, the what was back then the farewell tour, the 2000 tour. I that was the first time I saw the four of them. I know that it was great to finally see them, but I still think that they're great to see now. I know not everybody likes to see the four guys that come up on stage now, but that was the last big concert I went to in the beginning of March. They played Staples Center out here in LA, and a week later everything shut down, and I'm thinking about like, well, fuck, I was at Staples Center with 20,000 people. And then you heard about like all the NBA players that, came down with the virus. So there were a couple of weeks where I was like, well, that was a good concert. I hope it was worth it. But then, it turned out everything was fine. But, just the idea of being at a huge show like that again, I can't even imagine when it is. What was the last show you went to? I'm sure you didn't know it was going to be the last show for a while, right?
Yeah, well, luckily it was the Monsters of Rock cruise. So I got to see about 40 bands play on that one. So that was a good way to go out too, man. But I was just thinking, because we've been talking about Kiss, like, because I know Eddie is he's so wrapped up in Tommy and Eric Singer,
right,
taking Ace and Peter's makeup, and I get that. I mean, I think it's funny. He's just so passionate about it, which is what I love about Eddie.
Sure,
but I wonder if like 15 years from now he'll be like, when those guys get replaced in Kiss, will he be yelling like at the two new guys, "You can't replace Tommy and Eric"?
Yeah.
Like, how many generations is this going to go on? Because eventually Gene and Paul are going to replace themselves, right?
That's what they say, yeah. And I mean, the thing about Eric Singer is that he's been the drummer in Kiss now longer than anybody. He's longer than Eric Carr, longer than Peter Criss, including the different stints. And he was the drummer in the first show I ever went to, because he was Alice Cooper's drummer on that Trash tour. And I mean, he's such a great drummer. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Peter, but seeing, I don't love drum solos, but an Eric Carr and an Eric Singer drum solo, it's not worth like going to get a beer or whatever. I always think those guys are really well worth it, and checking it out. But yeah, it's interesting, and I get anybody who doesn't want to see other guys in Kiss makeup, but I don't know. I and it's weird because Tommy is a great musician, but it's fine. Nobody has to go that doesn't want to. Kiss is doing fine, and one day they'll get back on their end of the road tour. But I mean, those are old guys. And and when you're concerned about a virus that mostly affects older people, you kind of wonder, like, are they going to get back on that tour ever? Or are they going to do it in like 2022? Are they going to just do a couple more shows? And somebody like Alice Cooper seems like he's in good shape, but he's 70 as well, I think. So you start.
So he's 72.
72, yeah, right. And and guys like Steven Tyler, they're all that age. And I don't like, the exception would be Keith Richards, who I think Dice had the joke that he died 20 years ago. He just hasn't figured it out yet. I forget how he worded but you think about all these old guys, and it's just like, yeah, maybe we're not going to see them for a while. But I'm sort of wondering, you as a stand-up, we're talking about Florentine, and I know last weekend he did a show at a drive-in, which sounds interesting. And I'm actually going to have him on with Dennis on Monday, because I know Dennis will be interested in hearing about that. Like, what was it like? And him talking about, like, well, they honked their horns instead of like applauding or laughing. What do you think about that? I mean, would it be cool to just check out it for, because you haven't been on stage in a while? If those sort of opportunities come up to you, like, oh yeah, we're going to have you, stand out in a parking lot or at a drive-in. I mean, is it worth trying that, since there's not real stage time at the moment?
Hey, Christian, I can even top Florentine. I did comedy in an outhouse.
In an
actual outhouse.
Yeah, you were hanging. You posted a picture of that, right? You were hanging out at a farm with, I forget what band it was, right? They were it's like a band that right?
Yeah, my buddy Greg Smith, who's the bass player for Ted Nugent,
right,
lives out in the mountains of Pennsylvania, and he's been doing a live Facebook thing every Saturday at 2:00, weather permitting. And I went out. I just went out there to hang, and on this farmland, there's this old cabin. Like the minute you see it, like 9 sorority girls are gonna die in it. Like it's like one of those kind of looking cabins.
Right.
And then they were playing. The drummer was set up on the porch, and Greg and the guitar player were down on the grass. And then behind it was an old outhouse, like Cool Hand Luke style outhouse. And I was like, dude, I'll totally come back next week and do a set from the outhouse. And I did. We wired it up, had a microphone, everything. The crowd, social distance crowd.
Of course.
And I did a set out there in the outhouse. So, and then there was a bucket in there in case you actually had to use it. And at the end of the set, I kicked the bucket to symbolize where my career has gone. And it was actually a lot of fun.
That's it. Now you know where you're going to do your next album. It'll be the outhouse session.
100%. It's already locked in.
In terms of bigger gigs, I've heard Florentine talk about this. I've heard Jim Brewer talk about, doing something crazy like performing, opening for Metallica and doing like 40 minutes. But I know you've gone out on the road with a lot of bands. In fact, I think this spring, maybe right now, you were supposed to be out in Europe with Saxon, right?
Yeah.
Or not Saxon, but just Biff, right? It wasn't the whole band. He was doing solo gigs. That's what you were going to do?
Yeah, with their singer Biff, and he has a solo record out. And then, of course, my album, coincidentally, is a parody of a Saxon album. Instead of Denim and Leather, it's Denim and Laughter.
Right.
And of course, they were cool. They let me use all the artwork and everything. And I was like, this will be great, man. I'll go over to Europe. And at the merch table, hopefully, like, people will think I'm selling copies of Saxon's Denim and Leather. And I'll get a whole bunch of extra sales out. Yeah. And by the time they realize, it's a Jersey comic, telling dirty jokes, it'll be too late, and I'll have all their euros. But yeah, that's another, no touring, so that got shot down. But I'm about to put it out on vinyl, which I'm really excited about. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we'll see. That'll be good on a merch table at some point. I feel like I've heard you talk about some of the bands you toured with. Did you recently, within the last couple of years, did you do like Faster Pussycat and sort of like those level of bands, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've done Faster Pussycat. I toured with Zakk Wylde,
right?
His Zach Sabbath tribute band. Pop Evil, I toured with. This band Hookers and Blow, which is sort of like it's Dizzy Reed from Guns N' Roses,
Right, yeah.
Alex Grassi from Quiet Riot, Johnny Kelly, and Mike Duda from Wasp. So I've been out with those guys, and I was also at the Orion Festival that Metallica did in Atlantic City, whereas me, Florentine, and Brewer,
Great,
essentially, opening for Metallica at this festival. And man, that was the most intense thing I've ever done in my life. Just thousands and thousands of metalheads. It's 4:00 in the afternoon, and I got to go out and do 30 minutes. And it was like, oh my God, like I was so terrified. And I'm standing on the side of the stage, and I'm just, it's August, it's, South Jersey. I'm sweating, I'm nervous. A golf cart pulls up, and there's Lars. And I'm like, what's Lars doing here? I don't want him to see this. This is gonna be a disaster. And I'm like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I came down to introduce you. So I was like, okay, that's good. Like, if Lars gives me, that's like Lars giving me the thumbs up. So yeah, man, it was great. He went up, he gave me a great intro. He's like, you guys all love that metal show, right? And everyone, yeah. So he got the crowd focused. And then I went out, and man, I didn't breathe for about the first 12 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I finally found a place where I could take a breath. I was having a good set, but I finally relaxed. I took a deep breath. I told a joke, and it destroyed. And then there was a huge round of applause. And I was like, I knew the joke was good, but it wasn't that good to get an applause.
Right.
And I turned and look because I see people looking over to the right of me. I turn around, and there's James Hetfield sitting on one of the amplifiers on the side. I'm like, oh, that was for him, you mother. All right, cool. And then I started laughing, and everybody laughed, and then I was relaxed the rest of the set. Yeah. And I walked off to the side, and Hetfield puts his hand out, and he goes, hey, now we know comedy works at our festival. So what a super killer experience. And then that snowballed into bands asking me, hey, do you want to come out on the road and do comedy? So it's been great the last 10 years. And just a little tag to that whole experience. The Orion Fest is, because we talk about show business, like how people don't understand, like, why just call Comedy Central and tell them to give you a special,
Right.
I played Metallica's Orion Fest on a Saturday. Thousands and thousands of people at this festival. The following Thursday, I played the back room of a pizza place in North Jersey. That's show business.
They paid you an extra toppings,
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I had a guy named Vinny telling me not to back up too far because the pizza oven was behind me.
What is it like, just in general, like, even if people, like, they see maybe on the ticket or the ad that you're going to be there, what's it like doing comedy when, people are there? That's not what they came out for. Even if they know it's going to be there, they're there for the band. So is it sometimes you're just like, I'm not going to win them over no matter what I do? Or does everybody have most crowds anyway have like a point, like, all right, you just have to find out what it is that they're going to react to that isn't seeing the band that they want to see?
Well, the first part of what you said is the key to the whole thing. The one thing I insist on is that I'm put in the advertising for it and on the poster. That way people know, featuring the rock and roll comedy of Don Jamieson. So to me, I'm just another opening act. If you want to come in and see me, you come in and see me. If you don't, you could stand outside and smoke a joint or get a beer at the concessions, but you're warned. There's going to be a comedy act. Now, luckily, I have a decent recognition factor with, the hard rock and metal audience from doing that metal show. So I have a little grace period before, people start booing. But to be honest, I think I've had, as good, if not, a better record than a lot of opening bands. I mean, you hear all these horror stories about opening bands being booed off the stage or, have stuff thrown at them. Now, I've had some not so good sets over the years opening for bands, but honestly, man, 97% of the time, people are really open to it, man. People are a lot more open-minded than you give them credit for. And of course, I'm doing all material that's related to what they love. I'm not up there, talking about how, oh, my wife's a pain in the ass. Oh, my kid is nuts. I'm on stage talking about Black Sabbath, Alice Cooper, Ozzy, making fun of the headlining band. And it's been really positive, man. I got to say, metalheads they're the coolest.
Yeah, and I think that I think that's really smart that people know that that's what they're getting. That there is going to be comedy at some point, so it's not a shock for at least the majority of people there in the crowd. So yeah, I mean I can imagine that being fun once you kind of settle into the vibe of it, and it's good because I mean most places don't serve beer in bottles anymore. So if anybody's going to throw anything at you, it's probably going to be a plastic cup. Although
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to serve drinks in the future, but I don't know. You're hearing about obviously there've been a handful of concerts mostly outside, and I mean I've heard comics are booked in places like Florida like within the next couple months.
Yeah.
Do you feel like obviously people are certainly ready, to go to shows, and I think how difficult do you think it would be if you're even at like a comedy club and maybe they're at like I don't know 30% capacity? You feel like, and it's not just like everybody's bunched in the front, which I feel like you could it's like you're sort of making the place feel more cavernous. Do you feel like it's very easy to just kind of when everybody just acknowledge like yeah this is weird, and then they'll just be so glad to laugh again whenever that time is?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same for comics. We're just, we're laughing about, performing in an outhouse, or Florentine standing on on the back of a pickup truck doing comedy to beeps. But that's how badly the audience wants it, and that's how bad the comics want it. It's not ideal because man, this part of the magic and part of the formula for success for comedy is the seating. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't seat people properly, the show will suffer. But at this point, yeah, man, it's like, we'll take what we can get until things get back to normal. I'm in a state, obviously, I'm in New Jersey. I think I'm actually the last person alive here. So the lockdown's not ending here for a while. But in places like Florida, they're in the bars, they're in the restaurants. It's like nothing happened down there. So, I'm ready to go when it's safe, and obviously I travel anyway. So, Florida, here I come.
Yeah, my dad lives in Tampa with his wife, and they'll post on Facebook that they're like out having dinner, and the first couple times I'm like, oh, that's so weird. I'm like, yeah, but it's been a while that it's been open there. I'm gonna spend some time down in Orange County here in Southern California at my wife's family's house. We're just because we have two small kids. And we love our kids, but we've been in the house with them for 3 months. So it's like, let's go somewhere where there's a backyard and a pool, maybe that'll be fun for a bit. And, but Orange County is further ahead of Los Angeles. So it's like, well, by the time we get down there, it's like your stuff will have been open for a month. And I'm like trying to gradually convince my wife, well, what if we went to a restaurant where we sat outside? We didn't even go inside. The table's going to be clean. I'll even bring some Clorox wipes. We can wipe down the table ourselves. What do you think about that?
Yep.
And I also haven't gotten my hair cut in 5 months, which I think is great when I'm talking to you. But at some point, I'll be back out in the world, and I'm like, I should probably do something with this, And yeah, I think we're both in states where it's like, all right, not so fast, everybody. Let's we'll get out there when we can. But I don't know. I mean, honestly, it's again, I have 2 small kids, so I don't like eating out in restaurants with them anyway. I'd rather get it delivered. I'd rather do curbside pickup.
Yeah.
Curbside pickup is suddenly like places that never did that are like, wait, I just pull up in my car and you bring me the food. Oh, and you want, and you take credit cards now. You don't even want to touch my money. Okay, great. So there's, finding the silver lining in there, for this weird existence that we all have,
Yeah, because we're all trying to adapt to the best that we can as human beings, but we all need the basics, companionship, and all that stuff, and that's what's obviously driving people crazy the most. But yeah, man, it's just just trying to go along with the plan, but everyone's anxious to get back. And like when you see these polls where, especially with concerts, people are going, they're taking polls. No, look at this poll says 85% of people won't go back to concerts unless there's a vaccine. They will go back.
Yeah.
trust me, the first time they see a post from somebody at a concert having fun, they'll be like, oh, yeah, maybe I'll go.
Yeah.
It's like, it's you don't know till you're in that position.
Right. And I mean, when you think of the tours that got canceled or postponed this year, there were some big ones, but to save the industry, when you think of like, well, who's going to be out on the road next year, because, Live Nation, Ticketmaster lost like, I don't know, billions of dollars. All of a sudden they're, it's like bands that you didn't think were going to be out. Who even knows, I mean, I know Slayer retired, but there's probably a dollar amount for like, we should do some more of those big four shows. You want to split $1 billion between the four bands? Yeah, all right. I guess I don't want to, so when you start to see like, oh, somebody's seeing like my 3 favorite bands tonight in my state, and I said I'm waiting for a vaccine. Well, fuck, they're playing again tomorrow night. All right, I'm going.
It's fucking Slayer. I gotta go. And and Christian, you know how I feel about these farewell tours. They're not farewell tours, which I've proven with all my predictions. So even Twisted Sister, Slayer, to me, they're not retired. They're just on the clock.
Right. Yeah, because that went, didn't that go viral? You said to Mick Mars when their farewell tour, which actually is where this Alice Cooper shirt is from, the Motley Crue farewell tour. He opened for them at the Hollywood Bowl, which was a great place to see Alice. And that was their big farewell tour. But didn't you actually get Mick Mars to say, all right, if we go back out on the road, I'll refund everybody's money? He said something like that, right?
Yeah, well, when he was on that metal show, I said, you'll be back. And I was, I wasn't being a dick about it. No. I was just saying, I know you guys think you won't be back, but you will, because everybody comes back eventually. And I said, and I don't think you're trying to deceive your fans. I believe that you guys believe you're done, but you'll be back. And, Mick and I, we were shaking our fingers at each other, very playfully.
Yeah, of course.
And so finally he goes, listen, if we do come back, free tickets for the whole world. So I posted that little clip on my social media. 2 days go by, and I mean, sure enough, it spread all over the world. People from Tokyo, people from Australia, people from South America are all replying to the tweet. Hey, Mick, I'm from Brazil. Where do I pick up my tickets? Hey, Mick, I'm from Mexico. Where do I pick up my tickets? He finally had to put out a statement 2 days later saying, okay, clearly I was joking around on that show. So, just to calm everything. And then Steel Panther jumped on. They were giving him a ton of shit.
Right,
so
of course.
It was really funny. And this, again, what I said to him, Mick, on the show is, I think you'll be back. And guess what? When you are, I'll be the first one online. So, and I still hold to that.
Yeah.
I'm glad they're back. It's going to be, hopefully next summer we're back to normal, and because that's a big stadium tour, right? Yeah. Obviously, you're going to get some club bands that'll come back faster, but hopefully we get those stadium tours again. And that's going to be a great tour, man. Def Leppard, Motley, Poison on a July afternoon in an outdoor arena by you. That's what a great time.
Yeah, you get there early, and Joan Jett in theory is there, which reminds me that when you were talking about opening for bands, the next time you talk to my boss, Dennis Miller, ask him about, he did a festival where there was comedy and music, and he was on one stage. He got like 2 words into his first joke, and then the other stage, Joan Jett started playing like that. So like right away, I Hate Myself for Loving You kicks. So he has to like do comedy on a stage where you can hear almost as loud as him, a band. And, I meant to mention that earlier, just because it's, it's like, it's tough enough to get, music fans to listen to comedy, but it's like when they can actually hear the music, I'm sure it's that much harder,
Right. And he's thinking, I hate myself too, Joan, at this very moment, because nobody's going to listen to what I had to say. But, it was the fun thing about having your boss on, besides that, I'm a massive fan and he's a legend, but, I just wanted to talk to him about music. Yeah. And that was, I hope that was a break for him from all the political and social stuff. And then conversely, when I did his show, I wanted to talk about political and social stuff because I don't really get to do that a lot. So I thought that would be a good dynamic to sort of take him out of his normal element, even though he's obviously a legit rock fan, but to give him a break from talking about Trump and what's
Yeah.
going on in the world. And again, I don't, other than live stand up, I don't really have a place to express myself on how I feel about it, what's
Yeah.
going on in the world. So it was really cool, man.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I thought it was great because there was some of what I knew, but he goes really deep into, obviously he makes all these references, but he'll remember stuff he read in liner notes in the early 70s, on like an Emerson, Lake and Palmer album that he'll really just go into, and it's great. And when you're, basically like his co-host, I get about half of it, and a lot of it is just me laughing and being like, yeah, right.
Yep.
I had no idea, and then I'm like, if there's a follow-up, then I have to admit, like, I have to type really fast to try and figure out what it is. But yeah, and I think, look, he's known as a political comedian, but that's why he loves doing stuff like on Turner Classic Movies, because he can talk about all movies and he can talk about music, he talk about books, what he's watching. He was late to the party and he just like binged the entire season of The Wire, or series of The Wire. So there's always so much he can talk about. And it's just usually people are like, oh yeah, this is the guy to get on to talk about politics, especially right now. He's like, it's kind of exhausting to talk about. So it's great. But yeah, I can see it's sort of, it was almost like an exchange program, like when he got to talk about politics, he got to talk about music. Everybody wins, really. I did want to, and thanks for being so generous with your time. I'll let you go in a few minutes. I did want to talk about the album, Denim and Laughter, which I listened to before you were on with Dennis, but I remember I made some notes about it. So you recorded it like in a speakeasy in LA, and I don't even know where that would be. But it seems like it was a small crowd, but like not in a bad way, like in a way that you can kind of really hear the reactions. Talk a little bit about where it was, and this idea of recording in a venue like that, which is slightly larger than an outhouse.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm slowly working my way down to the outhouse.
Right.
So I'm trying to size these crowds down for the live albums. I've just always done my live albums in weird places. My first one was in a rock club. My second one was in like a BYOB comedy club down at the Jersey Shore. And I try to capture a certain vibe with my comedy albums, because while there's tons of much better comedians than me, sometimes I'll listen to their record or see their special, and they could be in Kansas City, they could be in Boston, they could be in Hawaii. You know what I mean? It's like you don't get a vibe of like the setting. So I always like making that a part of it. So when my friend's boyfriend, when she told me he had a speakeasy, literally an illegal club in Los Angeles, where they have a bar and a bartender and a stage, and they have bands and comics play in there, and it's also a recording studio at the same time, it doubles as a recording studio, I said, I'm in. Send me pictures. I want to take a look at it. It looks like an old speakeasy from the 30s. And I couldn't, you wouldn't know it, because the only way to get people to come was like I had to make a Facebook event. And then we said, the morning of the shows, the tapings, that we'll email you the address of where this place is in North Hollywood. And that's what we did. And I recorded 2 shows. Yeah, probably 40 people at each show. But I wanted to capture that vibe of like, yes, we're in a speakeasy and we could be raided at any moment by the cops, which I thought would be a great ending to the album if it happened.
Yeah, as long as you'd gotten most of the way through the album, that would have been good. Yeah, I've had the pleasure of being with Dennis a couple times when he's filmed specials, and it's funny because of course you always do 2 shows just because you want to get it, but it seems like, and I'm sure you've done this for all the albums and everything, usually there's one that almost everything kind of goes from one show because it's like it flows well. Every once in a while, like you can't hear that joke because of the mic. But in the case of his most recent special, we went and did that at this great theater in Knoxville. It was really like the first show, we were done and we're like, well, we got people coming for the second one, so we might as well still do it. But I think that almost the whole special was from that first show. But I feel like that's usually kind of what it is. You don't really mix and match as much as you think you might, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%, man. And by the way, that record is brilliant, man. I don't know if he ever uses outside writers at all, but what a great job that would be to be a writer for Dennis Miller, because like there'd be almost no reference that you could write that he would go, that's a little too old. You know, like what's the worst he's going to say? Like, let's not go BC on this special, like with the references, but yet he's so current and he's so, smart on what's going on in current events, but yet, you'll have, a reference from, a Black Plague reference or Methuselah or, something like that. So I just love that style. And then he goes into like almost like one-liners, and man, it's just so, I love comics like that where you might get one silly joke, you might get a one-liner, then you'll get a story. And so, I agree, man. No matter how no matter what the method to your madness is as a live performer, there has to be a flow. So you kind of tape the shows and then you go, you know what, it's 95% this one.
Yeah.
And then you go, I kind of flubbed on here. And like, even on most of my records, even if a joke doesn't get the exact laugh that I was hoping it would get, but I don't want to just like cut it out of the middle and ruin the flow of like that whole moment. Like on the new one, I there's a couple times where I go, listen, I can edit the laugh in if I want to, and I leave all that stuff in, because it's like I'm not going to chop it out. I want this to flow nicely. It's so disruptive to the ear if you're listening at home. Like if you ever watch comedy, sometimes in Comedy Central, the specials, like you go, oh my God, wait a minute. He was just talking about riding a horse, and now he's talking about Obama. Like, what got cut out of there? There's something missing in there. So, yeah, there's got to be a flow.
Yeah, no, I mean, especially TV specials. For somewhere like Comedy Central where they have commercials, there'll be that like way too long, cut of cutting into somebody in the crowd, like laughing really hard, and then you're like, oh, was his glass of water like not half full in that last shot? They're like, nobody's going to notice. You definitely see that a lot. You're just like, yeah, I bet there was some good stuff in there. But yeah. So the album, Denim and Laughter, I thought was fun. And now you've already planning for the Outhouse tour, and you should see, if people are going to do tours of drive-ins, like where are there other public outhouses where you could, try and, to help promote it, actually get out.
Yeah. I was thinking of that as a one-off, but now you got the wheel spinning, Christian. I think the Outhouse Now tour is, that's, you planted some seeds here. So I'm going to contact a bunch of farmers across the country and see if I can, rustle up a few dates.
I was always, as a child, I was always horrified by the idea of an outhouse, like Little House on the Prairie, that they had an outhouse. We didn't have a lot of money, but my dad would always get vacation. And my grandmother owned this house on the mainland, right by the Jersey Shore, a town called Waretown. It's right by Long Beach Island. And so at this house, my great grandfather built it in like, I don't know, the early 1900s. So there was an outhouse, and my mom would talk about when she and her sisters were kids, they would have to go out and use the outhouse at night. So I would always kind of look at it and I'm like, I don't want to open that door. There's like 40-year-old poops in there, So the concept of the outhouse is so horrifying. But I guess when you think about it, the idea that, you shit in your house and then you're just like, okay, now it's gone. I guess maybe that's worse. At least outside is outside, I don't know which is.
Yeah. The one fatal flaw, that I'm thinking about right now for the Outhouse tour is, every couple of minutes or so, people are going to need to use the bathroom. So what am I going to be mid-joke and be like, yeah, so the horse had no legs and, oh, sorry, ma'am, you got to use the bathroom. And they'll have to stop the show, 20 or 30 times during the performance, but these are little minor details we got to work out.
That's why we're in the planning stages. Obviously there's teams of people. Live Nation is going to want to do the Outhouse tour. They're looking for niche things. It'll be fine. The last thing I want to talk to you about is I know that you're also a Mets fan, and I always it's like when you meet somebody that's a Mets fan, you always want to know, oh my God, why did you do this to yourself? What happened? For me, I was 10 when they won the World Series in 1986. So for me, that's basically like appropriately for the metaphor, Doc Gooden and Daryl Strawberry were like the crack dealers on the corner of an episode of 21 Jump Street, where they're like, "Hey kid, the first taste is free. Come on." And I'm like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. Oh my God, the Red Sox were supposed to win. And the ball went between his legs." And, there's never really been a moment quite like that again. But I've had a lot of great moments, including, by the way, flying from Los Angeles to Queens to go to 2 games in the 2015 World Series. And of course, neither of the ones that they won. So, I dropped like more than $1,000 to go to World Series games and didn't see them win in either of them. But that's my pain. We all have those stories. Is it just growing up in Jersey, or what happened what happened to you that you ended up a Mets fan?
Hey, I'm not the one who spent $1,000 flying across the country to see a doomed team.
I know.
I lived in Manhattan for 15 years. I took the subway, so
yeah.
I didn't spend quite as much as you did. But look, the younger people are all into fantasy sports now, and I get it because players get traded. The team's 90% different every year, so if you get attached to a player, it does make more sense to follow them. But we're old school guys. We stick with the teams that we grew up with. My dad was a Mets fan. He used to take me to the games, and I've just stayed that way my whole life. I almost never look forward to a season, but I'm actually looking forward to maybe this 50-game season would be great because there's no pressure. Like if the Mets don't make the playoffs or get to the World Series, I'm like, well, it was only a 50-game season. Yeah. And if they do make the playoffs and get to the World Series and win, I go, we won the World Series.
Yeah, there's no loss. Yeah, because if they miss it, you're like, if only there were 10 more games. That's all they would have needed.
Right.
But no, it's crazy though that, it's not crazy because of how much money's involved, that MLB seems to not be able to sort it out. But I think the NBA, like when I'm talking to you, it's June 4th. I think the NBA is announcing a shortened season today. The NHL seems to have a plan. Baseball's like, yeah, we're going to let you know. Yeah, we want to, but we can't quite figure out how to make it work. But
billionaires be billionairing.
Yeah, I think all the teams that own their own, like the Yankees have the Yes Network, and the Dodgers have their own channel out here in LA. All those teams are like, yeah, come on, we got to play some games, And then the other teams are just like, yeah, but we're not, we got to figure out how to make up for the revenue, the Angels don't have their own network, so you just think that it makes sense. Like you're going to get a lot of money by selling advertising on TV, but I guess they don't want to share that money with the players. And the players are also like, well, I signed a contract for this year. So I think both sides definitely should come a little closer to the middle. It's just frustrating where the NBA, which I personally don't like to watch that much until the finals, maybe, like they got it fast. And I'm just like, well, yeah, but how much more bearable would the last month have been if I could have put on a spirit crushing Mets loss at 4 p.m. Pacific time?
Well, that's what I told Dennis, when he was on my show. It was like, he got so much heat from Monday Night Football. I'm like, dude, I'm a lifelong Jets fan. My whole season every year pretty much is misery. So if they're down 42-3 in the fourth quarter and you throw a Methuselah reference in there, you just made my whole night. So I don't understand why these players can't just call the teams and say, hey, I want to play.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's
just
what
like comics. Yeah. Just do SNL. Just put that metal show on Netflix. Yeah. Players just call the teams and say, we're going to play.
Or then, of course, people who don't understand, how things get paid for is like, oh, you guys did it on Facebook. Great. Just do that. Yeah. So just do it for free, and get guests to fly out to Eddie's beach house on the boardwalk or whatever. Anyway, Don, I really appreciate you spending so much of your time with me. It was fun to just chat with you. Especially when somebody talks so passionately about music, you always feel like you know somebody already anyway. And I love how all the bands we got to talk about that, we have in common, and just to talk comedy and everything in general. It was great. Obviously, everybody should make sure that they follow you at Real Don Jamieson and DonJamieson.com. Denim and Laughter is the album. That Jamieson Show on Compound Media. And, you know, people hear us talk about compound media on the conversation we just had and on Dennis's show. As with anything, you can always get a free trial. You'll find so much stuff in that first week where you're like, oh, great, I want to, you know, hear like 5 more of those. So, you know, I mean, if you think about the stuff we pay for, it's not a bad deal. You get so much content over there. And, you know, one day we're going to be commuting places again. So you can also just listen to the audio version. So I'm a big fan over there. And, you know, not just because I have a free login for Compound Media, because I'm in the media.
Yeah. You're a mover and a shaker. I'm likewise talking to you, man. You know, I appreciate your support, and you know, I've been finding in these very dark times a lot of comfort in both music and comedy. You know, I've been listening to a lot of comedy lately, but everything from Dice to Woody Allen to the Jerky Boys. I've been going back and listening to a lot of my old vinyl and stuff that I haven't listened to in a while, and it's definitely helped to get through. So I appreciate you letting me come on, and this was like comfort food for me today, man. So,
Yeah,
Christian,
no, exactly. And I think that's why I do my podcast down here in this back room of my basement. You see all these old boxes of comic books and stuff. It's just it's something for people to focus on that's different than everything that's on the news. But also, I have 2 small kids running around upstairs. I'm like, yeah, look, I got to go do this interview. So this hour is like hands down the best part of my day, and not just because it was fun talking to you. Don Jamieson, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for the Bladtcast. Of course, BLADTCAST.com, at Bladtcast, the Bladtcast on Facebook. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. We will see you next time on the Bladtcast.